There will be 8 Keys seats undefended at the general election, one of which belongs to Arbory, Castletown and Malew MHK Tim Glover, who joins me now in the studio. He looks back on his 5 years in office, compares what he's learned as an MHK with what he thought before he was elected, and admits to some frustrations along the way. Let's travel back in time, maybe 5 years to, slightly more than 5 years, when you thought, you know what, I wouldn't mind being an MHK. Why did you think that?
5 years later, that's a very pertinent question, but I remember distinctly at the time, I did think about standing in 2016. Didn't. And it got to 2021, and I thought, well, if I'm going to stand, I need to do it now. Or it's going to be something that I might look back on and think, well, why didn't I? Or why did I chicken out? Obviously had an interest in politics from the job I was doing up here. You can't help but get sort of absorbed into it all when you're reporting on the House of Keys and Tynwald sittings. So it got to 2021 and I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, now's the time.
And what were the things that you thought as a wannabe MHK that needed to change?
Unfortunately, I don't think any of that has changed, particularly in the last 5 years. I wanted a lot more actions to be occurring rather than reports and consultations. And I don't think that's happened. I think there's been an awful lot of talk the last 5 years. There's been talk on issues that we weren't even standing on that have come up during the past 5 years and taken up an enormous amount of parliamentary time. So I wanted, obviously, the whole issue, the number one thing on the doorstep last election was housing and affordable housing. And again, I don't think we've achieved what we set out to 5 years ago. I think that is still a big election issue on the doorstep. Yes, we've got this report that's been done, but people don't live in reports.
Why then? Because when you are elected, and there were quite a lot of new wannabe MHKs who got in for the first time at the last election, and indeed we know that there will be at least 8 this time round. What is it that's different when you get elected to what you think is going to happen when you're there making bold pronouncements on the doorstep and in your manifesto?
I think I've described it as wading through treacle at times. Things just don't happen quickly within the Isle of Man government, and I was really hopeful that was going to change as we were coming out of COVID, because the whole COVID crisis meant government had to work really quickly and make very quick decisions. But we soon went straight back to the old way of doing things, and I don't know why that is. I really don't. So my wish for the next 5 years, and those that get elected, is that we stop the talking and the writing of reports, and we start actioning what's said in those reporents. Because I don't think there's been enough of that.
Yeah, is there a kind of I don't know. I mean, the civil service, certainly in my experience, are there to act as a cautionary voice and to say, okay, this is what you want to do. These are the reasons why it might sort of blow up in your face, and maybe it's not such a good idea. At that point, my view was, if I really wanted to do a thing, okay, I've heard the advice from the civil service, but this is something that we're going to do because I think it's the right thing to do. Is it possibly down to maybe not as much experience around? Because, I got lots of good advice from people who had been in the House of Keys for 10, 15, 20 years before me, and they were saying, yes, occasionally the civil service will say things to you, but if you are determined, ultimately you're in charge, you make the decisions.
I think that is a danger coming up, and of course you've lost a very experienced MHK who's been elevated now to Mr. President. So that's another. I mean, he's in a very neutral presiding role now.
I suppose he's still
he
able
can still
to
guide
advise.
people and advise. It is a mentoring role and also a welfare role that he'll be taking on. So yes, if you get not enough experience in the House, there is a danger that that drift will continue while people are learning. Because anybody going in, I warn you now, there's a lot of learning to do, and I had an advantage in that I had seen how the system works, but it's nothing to actually being on the other side of that fence, as it were. There is a lot of learning to do, an awful lot of reading to do as well, and good luck.
So, 5 years on, what do you think you've managed to achieve in those 5 years?
I don't think I've achieved what I set out to achieve 5 years ago, and I would say that anybody that didn't give you an honest answer like that is not being frankly truthful. Because it is very difficult. You're only one of 24, so you've got to bring at least another 12 with you on topics, and that's and again, if you're outside of the Council of Ministers, that's difficult to do. To get that number, it really is, and people will find that out, that they're going to run into roadblocks and along the way. I enjoyed my time, as brief as it was, in Cabinet Office, because there was an awful lot happening at that time with the Queen's Jubilee and with the Ukraine crisis. So I was very much involved in getting those schemes off the ground and at the table while all that was being talked about. And I enjoyed my time in infrastructure, where I was dealing with ports. This won't be a popular one, but I did bring in the Ringo app at the airport. However, that was only meant to be a temporary measure, while a more permanent solution was found. But at least it was bringing income back into infrastructure that was just being lost. Not everybody's cup of tea, but I'll take that one on the chin. I will emphasise it was only meant to be a temporary measure, and that's an example again of the frustration you get in government, because a temporary measure brought in 22, I think it was. It's still there in 26. So.
Well, I can point to temporary measures introduced in 2009 that still exist. Not least significant cuts to budgets, particularly. You referenced there DOI. There was a huge cut in 2010 to the DOI's budget. And at the time, the discussion was very firmly, OK, we can do this as a short-term fix. And the short-term fix was to address the 200 million loss in the VAT sharing arrangement with the Isle of Man government. Short term we can do this, but long term we have to find a better solution to continue to fund and maintain our infrastructure, and that better solution has not
materialised. Yeah. I've enjoyed also then the scrutiny side of things, and I've really enjoyed being on the Social Affairs Policy Review Committee, where you get the annual evidence sessions with the likes of MHK and the Department of Health and Education, Safeguarding and others. And I think we've done some significant work in bringing the Smile of Man back, so that we're getting that fluoride varnish now for primary school children that had been lost for a while, because dental health, particularly in the youngsters, was a big issue.
Yes, it's shockingly bad.
So I'm really glad we've been able to get that over the line, and thanks to Public Health for taking that on board from the report that we produced on the dental services on the island.
So actually,
but I think we've shone this is an important one. We've shone a big spotlight on suicide. That report was only laid just as this Tynwald was coming to an end, but it will be on the agenda for the October Tynwald. So that will it's an enormous amount of work talking with third parties in particular, and that was a really important report, which I hope will be taken up now by the next enclave, as it were.
Yeah. And in terms then in the Social Affairs Committee, you will have heard lots of evidence about how well or otherwise Manx Care is working, the relationship between the Department of Health and Social Care and Manx Care. We see in lots of manifestos that have been starting to appear suggestions that what we need is another review, another investigation. What's your view?
I think we've had that further investigation at the moment. The Department for Health is looking at the whole issue of governance and of Manx Care. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. That work has already been done, and the option 3 was the one to go for, where there is a more defined and closer working relationship between the Department of Health and Manx Care, and Tynwald has voted on that. So that, I think, is the way that we should now be working. But I do have concerns still there that we're not duplicating stuff, and we need to have clear, defined roles for when things go wrong. We don't get a situation where Manx Care blames the department and the department blames Manx Care. That's a dangerous way to go. So I think the solution's there for the moment. I don't think we need that big audited review that some people have been calling for. We've done a lot of that work. It's now time to build the foundations of a better working relationship between the department and Manx Care. I don't think that was clearly set out right at the beginning after the Sir Jonathan Michaels report, and I think we've suffered for that.
Here's an interesting question for you then. Had you been offered a job as a minister, which is the department you would have most liked to go into, and which is the one that you would have not touched with a barge pole, and why?
I think there's 2 departments I would have very much considered, and one would have been education, sport and culture. I've got a natural affiliation there too, sport in particular, but education's really, really important, I think. And I think Home Affairs as well would be another area I would have liked to have had a go at if the opportunity had ever come along. I think the one I wouldn't touch with a barge pole would be Treasury. Numbers have never been high up as a skill set that I have. But I also think Treasury, the next administration, really needs to examine the role of Treasury, because I've observed over the last 5 years there's a growing frustration with Treasury being a holder-upper of things rather than actually trying to get things moving. I think Treasury, the whole area around Treasury and the control it actually has over what happens on the island, that really does need to be, I think, examined by the next administration. It shouldn't be a blocker, it should be an enabler.
And of course, thanks to the June sitting this year of Tynwald, Treasury has become even more complicated and difficult because, well, it's not absolutely clear what was agreed in terms of timescales, but it does appear that if not the next budget, then the budget after that is going to be far more open than the whole budget process has been, because I forget which of the committees it was, but I think it was a special committee set up to review the budget process, came back with a whole raft of changes, which is going to allow Tynwald members to have far more say over how the budget is pulled together. Now, having experienced it from both sides myself, both in Council of Ministers and out of Council of Ministers, I do wonder how you're going to get Tynwald members to agree on all of these areas that need to be in the budget. And there are inevitably going to be things that are going to be unpopular that will have to be in the budget.
The proof of it's going to be in the pudding, as they say. But since I've been arguing for reform of how the budget process is. The take it or leave it deal that we get presented with has never sat comfortably with me. I've only had 5 years of trying to get that over the line. I know Mr. President, as he is now, has spent 20 years trying to get some reform made. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But I personally think it's a good thing that that's going to be tried out. It may not work. We'll have to wait and see. But I think let's give it a go and see. And a much more open and transparent process it'll be as well. And it'll also allow members to get advice and stuff from outside rather than from inside, which is currently the way. And I find that frustrating, trying to get an independent view of a certain area that you maybe had a concern over. So I'm delighted it's got through, personally.
Yes, certainly one of the things that...
It was very noticeable in that vote, though. That it felt like it was a defeat for the Council of Ministers that
absolutely.
day,
yeah.
Because they were certainly wanting to bring in a whole wedge of amendments that would have put it to the long grass, effectively. It would have watered it down so much.
They would argue into grass that was slightly longer than the grass that it would be in.
And littered with cans in it as well. So...
But yeah,
but it was the backbenchers won that day.
Absolutely, and it will be interesting to see how that works out. Of the things that have been presented to you, what do you think is the thing that's maybe going to be the least popular, but most necessary to be done in the next 5 years? Because there are some big, tough decisions that need to be taken, aren't there?
Absolutely, and the whole size and scope of government, I think, is going to come under the spotlight more so than it has in... it's only really come under the spotlight in terms of trying to be part of a savings scheme, but I think there's going to be a bigger drive in that direction. I think the new administration are going to run into problems pretty quickly, because I can see a cost of living... It's never, in my opinion, gone away, but it's going to be much more acute come the first sittings in October. We've heard about the failing of harvesting of crops that's going to inevitably put food prices up come the autumn. And of course, we've still got the ongoing war in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine, which affects crops as well, particularly your oils and maize and that sort of thing. That is a big supplier of those is Ukraine. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on people at the start of this administration to come up with answers to. There'll be a lot of shouting and a lot of appeals over the cost of living come the autumn and winter. That's going to be, they need to be well aware of that. That's going to be the first problem and hurdle they face straight away.
There were two significant areas I felt, at least, where there seemed to be a general agreement in manifestos, at least at the beginning of this administration. One was the housing crisis, which we've sort of touched on, and doesn't really appear to have gone much further other than lots and lots of reports and investigations. The other one, though, was the whole green agenda, particularly climate change, renewable energy, all of that, which... it's at times it almost feels like government has waved the white flag in relation to that, in that it doesn't seem to want to put people up to defend government policy and explain even what's being proposed. I
still think the whole climate change agenda is still really, really important. And yes, we do need to play our part. The problem I have is that I've argued for the whole 5 years that it shouldn't be just government that was dealing with this. It should have been a mixture of private and public monies to come up with the solutions. I do firmly believe that Erie Stain and Skird is the wrong option. It's in the wrong place and the size of it as well that's being talked about. So I don't agree with that, but yet I saw things through my 5 years that I thought was so good, and I think one will get off the ground hopefully, and that's at the Andreas, the old aerodrome there, which a great mix of and it will help Manx farmers out as well in the long run as well, where they haven't got the wheat now to supply to a bakery, but they could supply to this. You know more about it because you went on a trip to Scotland to see one. What's the name of the
anaerobic digester?
That's a fantastic scheme, that. But that is private helping out there,
and potential to produce half the energy that we need, which again is quite something. But I'm sure we'll have Robert Murray on in future programmes to explain more about that.
But I was fascinated with that whole project. I went all the way up and met with them, and I thought it was fantastic.
But there was a view that seemed to be being expressed by lots of Tynwald members, so I can only imagine that this was as a result of a briefing that was given by some agency of government or other, that it was dangerous to have your energy production in the hands of the private sector, missing the point that that's quite common in the United Kingdom, certainly. What was there a briefing that suggested this, or what was that thinking?
No, we whenever we brought that up in briefings, we were always told that the cheapest option was for government to be doing it itself. I don't see that, and to my mind, we're beginning to see the costs begin to escalate, despite what Manx Utilities and their former chair, which just put on record and thoughts with the Wannenberg family. Devastating to hear that news. And I just noticed that the flags outside the Tynwald offices are very respectfully at half mast. So massive condolences to Lisa and the boys and brother Walter as well. But
yes, John. Maybe we should briefly touch on John's role over the last 5 years. He's not been the most vocal of Tynwald members, but
when he spoke, he spoke.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you listened and took it on board.
I loved doing interviews with John. He was always very straight talking, I think is the thing, and that's
he called a spade
thing,
a spade, didn't
an
he?
important thing in politics. I think.
Fully agree. A really sad loss, but I will say though, we had questions towards him and his role, and he did help myself and constituency colleague Jason Morehouse out with regular updates and meetings with the board about Erie Stain, so we could keep constituents up to date. So I thank him for that generosity, but we obviously had a major disagreement on policy in that respect.
Well, believe it or not, we're drawing to the end of the programme, but what would you say is the thing you're going to miss most about being an MHK?
Helping people, quite simply. You're in a privileged and honoured position to be able to help people that come to you with a variety of problems. Now, you can't always help people to the extent that they are hoping for, but at least if they see you've tried or you've pointed them in a particular direction and you've been helpful towards them, they won't hold that against you. But when you get to really help somebody and get them out of a hole that they're in, that's the biggest satisfaction, I think, as a local constituency MHK, that you can possibly get, that helping people. Advice
to people who are putting their hat in the ring for the first time, what would you say?
I would say don't forget your constituents, because if you want to go back in 5 years' time and face them and you haven't really helped them or spoken with them or made yourself available to them, you're going to get pretty short shrift from them. So never ever forget your constituents who put you in that privileged position that you're in. And I think the other thing is just act with integrity. Say what you think, by all means, but I think we've had a little bit too much of it lately, where, and Ewan Watterson's always the one that came out with this phrase, where you play the ball, not the player. And by all means play the ball, but we've had a little bit too much of the player being attacked in this last 5 years. And I had to put my hands up. Part of it.
One of the suggestions that some people possibly even including myself, would say about this past Tynwald is maybe it's just been a little bit too super sensitive about some of that actually you should expect as a politician that there's going to be some rough and tumble in politics, and maybe jumping straight into a complaint to the Standards Committee is perhaps not the answer.
I agree, and I think also it's really important that the presiding officers play a role in that mediation area before it gets subsequently put straight to a committee. Sort it out between yourselves first of all, but the presiding officers can also try and bang a few heads together and get an issue sorted before if it goes to a committee. Ultimately, the process has failed.
Yeah, and a snappy answer required for this one. one thing that you would, if you had a magic wand, you would like to see happen.
I would love to see more of our roads getting fixed, but it's so way down on the list, I feel, with each administration. But the road from the ferry bridge through Santon now is an absolute disgrace, and that's one of our first things that visitors see who've flown into Ronaldsway. They taken to Douglas maybe for business meetings or a holiday, and be thinking, what on earth's the road like? But the big one, of course, has got to be Castle Rushen High School.
That was Tim Glover, still just MHK. So what do you think? Do MHKs need thicker skins, or should we all try to be more respectful of people in public life? Do we know enough about candidates and the roles that they're seeking to fill? I'm Phil Gaughan. Go to Malew. Thanks for listening.